All right, everyone, we haven't even begun to see, I think, peak protesting in Paris and other areas. Really, the Yellow Jacket protests have spread now past just France. At first, it's basically French taxes and fuel-related costs. It's, hey, Macron's fuel taxes heaping misery upon a miserable situation, unacceptable, repeal it. He decides to call all of France bad people and act like the Jupiter he wants to be, really antagonizes his own population, and so the protests quickly overnight grow to like 10 times their former size. Where a few hundred people standing around with signs before, now there are several thousand, and they're throwing rocks and fucking Molotov cocktails, firing off fireworks and shit. You know, because I know that France is largely no guns, so they're fighting with rocks and fists mostly. Maybe using a yardstick, giving someone a good spanking. By the way, I disavow property damage in these things. It violates the NAP. You know, even if it's like, oh, well, I burned the cop car in anger. Okay, well, the taxpayers have to buy a new cop car. Sort of counterproductive. Thankfully, it looks like some of the police are sick of it, and they've been standing in solidarity to the point where it looks like the the EU's military, their sort of security forces are involved. Some of those tanks that people are taking pictures of that are sort of policing these riots, they don't have a French flag on them. The flag is a little bit different. And that's starting to piss people off in a dystopian sense. And this is what people like myself warned would happen years ago. Nobody paid us any heed. They called us conspiracy theorists when it was suggested. Seriously, well, if you have like an insurrection, domestic violence or something within your country, you have some sort of internal problem that approaches, literal civil war, your own security isn't going to be involved. They're going to pull in people from other shores that won't stand in solidarity with your population because they have no national loyalty to your population. They don't see them as their fellow anything. They're going to come in and they'll be flying under the European flag. Oh, well, that's exactly what's happening. It's sporadic. It's not like a full-on invasion, but it is happening. The reason for that is because the Yellow Jacket protests now are no longer just in France. They've metastasized to nearby countries. Aren't there 5 or 6 other countries right now where people are putting on yellow vests and protesting at the moment? That's fairly significant. But if you ask Macron, he has the right to rule because he's Jupiter, and if you ask the EU authorities, they'll say, well, these ne'er-do-well Nazis out there, all hundreds of thousands of them, I think, at this point. Yes, okay, everybody who protests government is a far-right evil nationalist. Even the ones that have, like, anarchist flags in their hands at the time that they're doing it. Those are, by the way, most often the ones that are splitting off from the other groups to go loot local businesses. Yeah, maybe the Yellow Jacket protesters should probably also think about trying to guard local businesses from that in order to improve their image, saying, oh, our beef isn't with the local shop owner or something, our beef is with Macron. And ultimately, the EU, this is almost a Eurosceptic sort of thing now, too. It's gone beyond just, the sort of national-level French politics. It starts out, it's literally nothing more than Macron imposes a fuel tax. Fuel costs are already high. Taxes are already high. We want it repealed. Instead of doing that, he does his antagonistic I am Jupiter bullshit, antagonizes everyone, completely threatens the people of France, says, well, we're going to crack some skulls. You're all thugs, basically. His approval is now sub 20%. It's basically non-survivable. He's getting down to Dilma Rousseff levels, and the longer the protests go on, the more that it will fall away. He'll end up with 0% support, and he'll have to resign. And then the Yellow Jacket protesters will have been successful. I think that a lot of people are trying to cast him off as far right because they're worried that people on the left will actually join them. And some of the things that some of these protesters want are like an expansion of the welfare state within France. I don't know what they're arguing for in some of these other states. They actually want to go further left. These aren't Nazis. These aren't people that are far right at all. There's some Euroscepticism, maybe some nativistic sentiment thrown in there. Generally, it seems to be anti-Macron. It's basically, Macron is a globalist shill. He has sold our country out. The economic situation is gloomy. We want him to be replaced by someone else. Why didn't you, by the way, just vote for Le Pen? Macron was, it was funny to see how the people, oh, well, Macron will govern this nation so well. He's such a great guy. He's the leader of the free world because he's not Donald Trump, basically, was how he was cast. He makes centrism exciting. No, he's not. He's not exciting. He's a dude with a geriatric wife and weird tendencies who calls his own population stupid shit and acts like he's a feudal leader from the era of serfdom or something. Like a tribal chieftain, a fucking warlord in the 1300s. That's how Macron acts. Like an autocratic individual. He wants to be king. He doesn't want to... He wants to be Napoleon. He wants to be the emperor of Europe. He's sort of in competition, I guess, with Frau Merkel over there, who wants to be the Führer of Europe. It's the same thing. It's the same globalist shit. It's abusive. And now you've got, tanks with EU insignia rolling through the streets of Paris. Oh, help me, says Macron. We might need to deploy the European army that we really do want to create. Well, it seems to already exist in some capacity, at least in the capacity of maybe some security forces. I guess they're going to guard Macron himself personally in, his little building, and they'll just surround him with APCs and shit and kill anyone that approaches the perimeter. Sad part is, there are people who would see that openly right before their very eyes, and they just shrug it off because they'd be like, well, the protesters look Nazis and shit. This is what you do to the far right. There are people that would exonerate him of this. You got a multimillionaire, corrupt dude who hangs out with billionaires and corporations and globalists who really love war and profit off of it. No, but somehow the people opposing him are the problem. Now, I think the problem is that you've got too much of a tendency, and this is a very European thing, by the way, you've got too much of a tendency of leaders not to give a shit about their people. And so they don't, in Macron's case, or Merkel's case, they want a post-national strong EU authority to do everything for them anyway. They just want to be in a position of power where they have some leverage over it. They don't even like their own nations. They don't want their own, Macron doesn't want France to exist. Merkel doesn't want Germany to exist. They want to amalgamate into this weird federated superstate that won't even work. It would collapse within weeks because it'd have to be abusive in order for it to be created. You'd have to bully around dissenting member states and it wouldn't work. Eventually it would collapse. It'd be just like the USSR, and for the same reasons. It would be economically backwards, socially dysfunctional. It would have no actual culture to hold it together, no civic or ethnic culture in the case of the EU. It would collapse. So yeah, it's doomed. Macron will probably end up having to resign. He'll get forced out of office. Look, 18% approval, and that's according to a very reliable polling service, YouGov, which has been right on the button in poll after poll for multiple elections here and elsewhere. I'm going to assume that that's probably roughly about the number. It's between 15 and 20%. That's not a survivable approval rate for the leader of a first world nation. That's barely survivable if you control the whole if you're like Assad and you control the whole military lock, stock, and barrel, you've loaded it down with people that are part of your sub-ethnicity or your particular religious sect or something, yeah, you can survive that because you can just kill anyone who dissents. But in the case of Macron, he can't really kill 10 million people. If he tried, even other world leaders that are globalists would have to condemn it. Otherwise, it'd look a little conspicuous what they were actually trying to do. Yeah, we expect them to open up re-education camps at some point. That'll be called, by the way, a conspiracy theory. Okay, that'll end up on Rational Wiki. I'm officially just joking, but, stranger things have happened in the world. Look at Venezuela. That's about all. Peace out.